Hey guys, so this video is going to be a little different than our normal tutorial video. We just cracked 10,000 subscribers, so first off, thank you for subscribing and following along as we make tutorials. But I asked in the YouTube community and on our Instagram page if you guys had any questions for us. So today's going to be a 10K AMA. Okay, so the first question I have here is from Carrie Gilpin Percy, who asked, what do you splurge on versus get the cheapest generic version, whether it be supplies, tools, etc.? Beyond that, what higher priced item would you save money for versus what's better to just make on your own? So this is a great question. And I think the one thing that you should always spend as much as you can afford on are tools, like power tools. And the only reason I say that is because I have bought more tools over the years and had to replace them as my skill set got better. And I started to learn what the limitations of the cheaper version of whatever that tool was. So I would always say, you know, if there's something that you think you might get a lot of use out of, like for me, the big aha moment was with a miter saw. I had a really affordable one and it served me well for a bunch of years. But I started to notice that there were things that it couldn't do accurately that really made a difference in prop making. So I went ahead and I saved up the cash and I went and bought the most expensive one that had all of the things that I wanted for what I thought was a reasonable price to spend. And that has been my workhorse for 5 years now, and I haven't regretted it one bit. As far as tools that you could DIY, I don't know that that's necessarily something that I would encourage people to do. I think there's a lot of options for people who are just getting into making. And I think that you can just as affordably buy something from somebody like Harbor Freight than if you were to try to make it yourself. And sometimes, honestly, making it yourself, while you may have the satisfaction of knowing that you did it, you could have saved a bunch of money by buying somewhat of a lower end tool. So that's my answer for your question, Carrie. Thank you for submitting it, and thanks for being a subscriber. Okay, so the next question up is from Savage Eye, who asks, what got you into prop making? This is the $1 million question. Actually, I lied. This is such a simple question for me to ask. Star Wars. Star Wars got me into prop making. When I was a kid, I wanted a lightsaber. And so my dad and I went out into the garage, and with some scrap wood and an old bicycle rubber hand grip, he made me a lightsaber. And from that point forward, I just knew that anything that I wanted could be made at home. And that kind of started me along that path. On and off over the years, I made stuff, I didn't make stuff, I bought stuff. Sometimes there are just people that are better at things than I could be. And much like the first question about which tools to buy versus make, you know, sometimes other people have put in the time and effort to figure out all of the pitfalls of making a particular prop. So, you know, in those cases, I would buy something. But generally speaking, now, if there's anything that I want, I make it. And it all kind of goes back to my dad making me a lightsaber when I was 6 or 7 years old. So the next question is from Terry Kitchen, who asks, where did you learn to do this stuff? I learned the same way that you guys are learning from me. I scoured the internet. I was a really early adopter of being online and frequented any kind of message boards or forums to learn as much as I could possibly learn from the people that shared their knowledge there. I've also been extremely fortunate to live in Los Angeles and to know people who work in the industry who have been very generous with their time and have helped to fill in a lot of the blanks of things that I couldn't figure out on my own. So, you know, a lot of it is just being willing to put in the legwork and figure out some things from what you can find online, not being afraid to open a book or two, which I know for a lot of people seems like a foreign idea considering how easy it is to find things online, and to just ask. You know, there's nothing wrong with asking people for help. especially when there are people who have blazed a trail, so to say, and know what is possible and what's not possible, and are willing to share their knowledge with you. So that is how I got into prop making. I highly encourage you to ask a question, read a book, search for something online, and when it's within the budget, go ahead and just tinker with some stuff and see what you come up with. The next question is from K&T Do Halloween, and it's, what is the one thing you've wanted to build or create but haven't for whatever reason? This is an easy one. This is something that's been sitting on my workbench for 6 years, maybe longer. And it has nothing to do with Halloween. As anyone who follows me on Instagram would know that I'm also a big Star Wars fan. And the one project that I have yet to tackle is replicating the Han Solo and carbonite prop from Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. It's a big prop. And a lot of the reason why I haven't started it is just because it's such a huge thing by scale to do. You have to have somewhere to put it. And I just don't have anywhere to put it. Although I do have all the parts to make it, I just don't know where it's going to live when it's done. So that is the one thing that I have wanted to build, but haven't gotten around to doing it yet. Our next question comes from Oh Hi Haunt, and they ask, what was your hardest prop or one you just didn't like doing? This is a great question. As a maker who does this for their own enjoyment, I pretty much do whatever I want to do. So to that end, I haven't come across something that I don't like. I will say this much. There are tasks that I don't care to do. Sanding being one of them. It's the worst. It is just the absolute worst. But aside from that, I love just getting out in the garage and doing stuff with my hands and making things. We all live such digital lives these days. To be able to get outside and to actually do things with your hands is such a refreshing thing to do with your time. And especially right now with everybody being at home so much, to be able to have a change of scenery and to do something a little bit different than your day to day, it's good for your mental health. So I would say there's nothing that I don't like doing, but everything needs to get done in order to get it across the finish line. This next question is from a viewer named David Rundle, who is asking about, he has a Halloween Ferris wheel that he's looking to make, but he's stuck on how to power the lights. And I assume the concern is that as the Ferris wheel spins, he doesn't want the wires to continue to spin on themselves and eventually get really taut and come apart. So I didn't actually know the answer to this question and had to look it up. But the part that you are looking for is called a slip ring connector. It's sometimes also called a rotary electrical contact joint. And basically it allows for your two power lines, one that's feeding your lights and the one that your lights are connected to swivel against each other without creating any additional tension where the two meet. So that is how you would solve that problem. Hope that was helpful for you. The next question is from Kevin Finkel, who asks, what is one prop you've always dreamed of making? This is a great question because it's a moving target. Every week it might be something different. As a fan of Star Wars and science fiction movies and horror and Halloween stuff and the Haunted Mansion, I may learn something about a movie or about how a prop was made that immediately will take me down the rabbit hole to try and figure out where they sourced parts or how it all works, or maybe it's something I can make on my own and that'll be the thing that I want to make but I haven't made yet. As it relates to Halloween stuff, and more specifically stuff that would go in our display, Mrs. Van Oaks and I have been talking for a while about possibly making a crypt facade of some kind that would house maybe a projection effect. But like most haunters, space is always an issue. So we've really been toying around with the idea of how we could build something that packs flat, that would fit in the amount of storage space that we have, but would allow us the flexibility to do the kinds of effects that we think might be really killer for something like that. So that's on my list of props to make for Halloween in the future. Anything else, it changes from day to day. The next question comes from John Flores 275, who asks, do you plan out next year's ideas, themes, or just start building and see what comes from it? Because our display has been the same for the last 9 years, really what we end up doing every year is assessing what needs to be fixed or things that can be improved upon. Because we don't change up our theme like a lot of people do, it affords us the ability to just improve on stuff that maybe didn't get done the way that we wanted to the first time, or our skills have improved to one degree or another, so we could do it better than the one that we've been using for however many years. So to answer your question in short, we don't change up our theme, so any of the ideas that we have are just in addition to, and they can kind of come at any time. But we don't really have a planning meeting to figure out what we're going to do. We just sort of jump in and see where we can go. Subscriber Pete G wants to know, what is our system for distributing 12-volt power? And to break that down into more simple terms, he wants to know, I'm assuming, how we power all of our LEDs. This is actually a pretty easy one. It all comes from one 12-volt power supply. It's a 12-volt 9-amp power supply, and because we're running so few LEDs, we don't need a ton of power. So everything is run out of one power supply, and it all lives in the foot of one of our columns. So the last question comes from R. Ducky, and they ask, what's a good project to begin with? I think it's safe to say that everyone knows that I will say tombstones, always. I really enjoy making them, and I think they take a bare minimum of tools and experience to make something that's really impressive. You can have a utility knife and a piece of foam, and that's all you need, really. And the beauty of it being, an old tombstone is that anytime you mess up, you can just make it look aged and blame it on the age of something. So I would say tombstones. I highly suggest you make at least one in your lifetime, just to say you have. Anyhow, that's all the questions for this AMA. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. I really appreciate you guys taking the time, and for all of you subscribing as we try to grow the channel and make more and more interesting tutorials to help you guys make more and more props. So I look forward to making new stuff for you guys, especially as we move towards the end of the year. And I'll see you next week with another tutorial. Happy haunting.